Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive exploring the world of green energy technologies. Seems like everyone's talking about green energy these days, right?
Mm.
But what's the real deal? What are the different types? What are the actual benefits and the challenges? We're going to tackle all of that today. You want to know more about green energies? We've gone through all those articles and research papers you sent over. And get this, did you know that green energy is actually projected to create millions of jobs worldwide? Amazing, huh? To help us really understand what's going on and, see the big picture, we've got our energy expert here with us.
Glad to be here. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how much attention green energy is getting lately. Seems like there's a real sense of urgency to transition to more sustainable energy practices.
So let's start by unpacking the different types of green energy technologies. What exactly are we talking about when we say green energy?
Well, we're talking about harnessing power from resources that are all around us, like sunlight, wind, water, and even, stuff like organic matter. And the main goal is to minimize the impact on the environment, especially when we compare it to fossil fuels.
So you're talking about solar, wind, hydropower, those kind of things, right?
Exactly. But each one has its own, unique characteristics. Take solar, for example. It produces absolutely zero greenhouse gases when it's actually working. That's a big plus, which, as Yorgos Schneepat points out in his essay.
Zero emissions during operation. That's incredible. What about wind energy? Those giant turbines are always kind of impressive to see.
Right, and they're only getting bigger, especially the ones offshore where the wind is stronger and blows more consistently.
So location is super important for wind energy then. What about hydropower? That's been around forever, right?
Oh yeah, for a long time. Hydropower depends on dams or those run-of-river systems to make electricity. It's a very well-established technology, but as Schneepat mentions, it can have some negative environmental impacts, depending on how it's set up and implemented.
That makes sense. What about biomass energy? Is that actually sustainable? It uses organic materials, but it still releases emissions, doesn't it?
That's a good question, and it's where the debate lies. Biomass can be renewable if we manage it responsibly, but if we're harvesting it faster than new plants can grow, then it can actually end up producing more greenhouse gases, as Schneepat emphasizes.
So it's definitely not a simple answer. Okay, how about geothermal energy? That one always seemed pretty cool, literally.
It is, literally. Geothermal uses the Earth's internal heat and provides a really reliable energy source, especially in places with volcanic activity.
Very cool. Okay, last one, biofuels. They're made from organic matter, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Think of things like ethanol and biodiesel. Those are fuels that can be used in our cars and trucks right now. And get this, there's a prediction that biofuels could meet over 25% of the global transportation fuel demand by, get this, 2050.
Whoa, that's a huge amount. Okay, so we've got a basic understanding now of what these green energy technologies are, but why is everyone so excited about them? What are the benefits we keep hearing about?
Well, the benefits kind of fall into three main categories: environmental, economic, and social.
Let's dig into those. Why is green energy so good for the environment?
Well, the most obvious benefit is that it helps to lower greenhouse gas emissions, which is a huge factor in fighting climate change, right? Plus, green energy also helps reduce other types of pollution that are linked to fossil fuels.
Okay, so that's definitely a win for the planet. What about the economic benefits?
Transitioning to green energy actually creates a lot of jobs. We're talking millions of jobs all around the world. Just in 2018, the renewable energy sector already employed something like 11 million people, and that number is expected to keep growing a lot.
Wow, so green jobs are really the future. What about the social impacts?
Green energy actually promotes energy independence, which is pretty important in the world today. Countries that use green energy can rely less on getting energy from other places, and that just makes them more stable and self-sufficient.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially with all the things going on in the world right now.
Exactly. Plus, when you reduce pollution, you end up with significant improvements in public health. This is especially true in places where lots of people live close together.
Okay, so green energy is sounding pretty amazing so far. But let's be real here. What are some of the things holding it back? It can't all be easy, can it?
You're right. There are definitely some challenges we need to overcome, even with all these advantages.
All right, so let's get into those. What are some of the main things that are making it hard to adopt green energy on a large scale?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is storage. Many sources of renewable energy, like solar and wind power, are what we call intermittent, meaning they aren't constant. The sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing.
Right, you can't control the weather. So how do we actually store energy for those times when we really need it?
That's a great question, and one of the biggest challenges. We really need efficient, affordable solutions for energy storage, and that's a huge area of research and development right now.
What about the cost of these green energy technologies themselves? I mean, are they actually affordable?
Cost can definitely be a barrier. Some of these green technologies need a lot of money up front to get them going. Think about things like those giant solar farms or geothermal power plants.
I can see how those initial costs might make some people hesitant to invest. What other challenges are there?
Inconsistent policies and regulations are another big roadblock. Schnepphat actually argues that we need clear and dependable policies to make people want to develop green energy and to make sure everyone's playing by the same rules, you know.
So governments need to be fully on board and support the transition to green energy. What about how the public feels about it? Do most people support switching to green energy?
Public support is really important, but unfortunately, a lot of people still don't know much about these technologies or really understand them.
People are probably a little unsure about trying something new, especially when it comes to something as essential as energy.
Yeah, exactly. There are some people who think green energy isn't reliable or that it costs too much. We have to do a better job educating people and addressing those concerns.
So being transparent and making sure people understand is really important. Are there any other obstacles that we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, financial constraints are another big one. The initial investments you need for green energy projects can be pretty huge, and this can be a turnoff for investors who want to see a return on their money quickly.
So figuring out ways to make investing in green energy more appealing is important. But even with all of these challenges, is there hope for the future of green energy? Where do we go from here?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to be optimistic about. There are some really exciting developments on the horizon. For example, we're seeing some cool advancements in new technologies like sustainable biomass and something called green hydrogen.
Green hydrogen, what is that?
Green hydrogen is made using renewable energy sources, so it's a really clean fuel option. It has the potential to completely change various industries like transportation and manufacturing.
That sounds pretty amazing. What other new technologies are shaping the future of green energy?
Electrifying transportation is a big trend right now. Electric cars are becoming more efficient and affordable, and as battery technology gets better, we're going to see their range and practicality increase significantly.
Fewer gas guzzlers on the roads, that's definitely a good thing. Anything else?
AI and big data are playing a big role too. Those technologies can be used to really fine-tune how we produce and consume energy, which can make our energy grids more resilient and efficient.
So basically, smarter technology can help us use green energy to its fullest potential. It sounds like even with these advancements, there are still some challenges ahead of us.
You're right. We still need to deal with limitations based on geography because not every place is suitable for every type of green energy. We also need to improve energy storage solutions. And of course, we need to invest a lot of money in upgrading our infrastructure.
It sounds like a complicated puzzle, but it seems like we're at least moving in the right direction. But hold on a sec. We haven't talked about how to actually use all of this in the real world. We have all these awesome green energy technologies, but how do we actually make them work within our current energy systems?
That is the key question, isn't it? We can't just suddenly switch everything over to solar and wind power overnight. It's gonna take some work. You're absolutely right. Integrating renewable energy sources into our existing grids is a pretty complex process, and we need to take a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. What are some of the main things we need to consider to integrate green energy into our current energy systems? What needs to happen to make this transition actually work?
Well, first off, we really need to modernize our grid infrastructure. Our current grids were mainly designed for those big, centralized fossil fuel power plants. Not really for all these decentralized, spread out renewable sources like solar and wind. You know what I mean? We need to upgrade them to handle the ups and downs and that spread out nature of green energy.
Oh, it's not just about slapping up more solar panels and wind turbines. It's about actually making sure our energy systems can actually use them.
Exactly. We also got to focus on energy storage systems. Remember how we talked about that earlier? Yeah, those renewable sources, they come and go. So we need ways to store that extra energy when it's available and then release it when everybody needs it.
Right. Like having these massive batteries for the whole grid.
Basically. And we can't forget about those smart grids. They use all that fancy tech to make everything run smoothly and bounce back better from problems.
Okay, so it's all about making those energy systems smarter and more flexible. What are some actual strategies for making that happen? What can governments and those energy companies actually do to make integration work?
Well, like I said, grid modernization is key. We have to put money into those advanced technologies and upgrades for our infrastructure. That way, we can boost the grid's capacity and efficiency. And then there's establishing clear standards for connecting everything. So we got to make sure all these different green energy technologies can work together safely and reliably.
Gotcha. So making sure it all just works together smoothly. What else?
Market reforms are really important too. We need to create a system where renewable energy can thrive, you know? It's got to be competitive. This might involve changing how energy markets work, using competitive bidding for those projects, and making sure people can make smart choices about their energy.
It's making it easier and just better for people to actually invest in and use green energy.
Yep, that's the idea. And of course, we can't forget about flexibility. We need to invest in better storage solutions and other ways to manage those fluctuations in supply and demand. It's just part of dealing with renewable energy, you know?
It seems like there's a lot to think about. Are there any countries out there already doing this well? Any success stories that we can learn from?
Oh yeah, definitely. There are several countries leading the charge when it comes to integrating green energy. For example, the United States just rolled out this Inflation Reduction Act. And it's designed to encourage people to develop renewable energy by making investments and promoting innovation.
That sounds promising. Any other examples?
The European Union's got this thing called the Fit for 55 package, and their goal is to slash greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. It's got all sorts of measures to encourage renewable energy and using energy more efficiently.
So there are definitely some models out there for other countries to follow. I want to talk about something that pops up all the time when people talk about green energy. Subsidies. We hear about government subsidies for green energy all the time. What's the deal with those? Are they really necessary to make this industry grow?
Subsidies, they can be kind of tricky. It's on one hand, they're often really important for helping us switch over to a green economy, especially at the beginning when these technologies are still getting their footing. They can help level the playing field, and make green energy more competitive with those traditional fossil fuels.
So they can give that industry a boost when it really needs it.
Exactly. But then you got to think about the other side of things. Certain types of subsidies could actually mess with trade and make it harder to move those goods and technologies around.
So we got to be smart about how we use those subsidies.
Yeah, for sure. The World Bank, they've actually warned against subsidies that are poorly designed, because they can actually slow things down. It's all about constantly checking and analyzing, making sure those subsidies are doing what they're supposed to and not causing more problems.
So it's about finding that right balance.
Yeah.
Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about the technical and economic stuff when it comes to green energy. But what about the human element? How do we get people on board with making this change? How do we make green energy something that everyone can relate to and actually use?
That's a great question, and it's something that gets overlooked a lot. Tech and policy are super important, but in the end, it's people who really drive change. It's about how the public sees things, the choices people make, and how communities get involved. That's what really shapes the future of green energy.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we connect the technical stuff with the human side of things? How do we make green energy more, real for people?
I think storytelling is a big part of it. We need to go beyond just throwing numbers and technical terms at people. We need to tell stories that connect with what people care about, Stories about communities that are using solar power, or people coming up with innovative solutions, everyday folks just making those sustainable choices. Those are the kind of stories that get people excited and make them want to get involved.
I love that. It's about showing people how green energy actually makes a difference in their lives, not just talking about it. But how do we do more than just tell stories? How do we make green energy something that people can actually, touch and feel?
You got to make it tangible, right? Think about things like those interactive exhibits, workshops in the community, hands-on learning experiences that break down the technology and show people how they can be a part of it.
So making people not just users of green energy, but actually participants in the whole transition.
Exactly. And education is super important too. Teaching kids about green energy in school, offering training for professionals, getting those public awareness campaigns out there. Those are all crucial steps.
So it's all about giving people the knowledge and skills they need to make good decisions and help build a more sustainable future. But what about those folks who are still a little skeptical? How do we get past that?
We have to address those concerns directly, We need to talk openly about the challenges, bust those myths, and provide solid information that people can trust. That's how you build trust and get people on board.
Being open and honest is super important. People are more likely to accept change when they feel like they know what's going on and have a say in it. But what about looking beyond just individual actions? What about the role of communities and bigger shifts in society? How do we build environments where green energy can really flourish?
That's a big one. We need to create spaces where it's just easier for people to go green. Think about things like community solar projects, incentives for making homes more energy efficient, and ways for people to get the financing they need.
So making those sustainable choices easier and more affordable.
Yep. And don't forget about social influence. As more and more people start using green energy, it just becomes, what everyone does. And that encourages even more people to jump on board.
It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of things changing, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive on green energy. We've gone over a ton of information today, from the basics of these different technologies to the global efforts to make them work and the importance of getting everyone involved. What are your final thoughts for our listeners as we finish up our exploration?
I guess what I'd say is shifting to a sustainable energy future is something we all have to do together. Every single action we take, even the small ones, can add up. Keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a world that's brighter and more sustainable.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a really eye-opening conversation.
Happy to be here.
And everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into green energy. We hope you learned some new stuff and got a sense of the exciting possibilities out there in the world of green energy. Until next time, stay curious.